when this blows, all the purchasing power of credit gets slammed into the purchasing power of money itself, which is gold, silver, and copper. And the holders of gold, silver, and copper, we know this from history. This has happened several times in history. It happened in revolutionary France. It happened in Weimar. It happened in the fall of the USSR. The holders of actual money at that time are able to acquire vast assets.
This is Kaiser Johnson with Liberty and Finance, and these are the Miles Franklin Weekly Specials for January 27th through February 3rd, 2025, while supplies last. This week, backdated 1-ounce silver Austrian Philharmonics are just $2.85 over spot, one of the lowest prices we've had on a sovereign coin in years. Next, AU pre-1933 $20 gold St. Gaudens coins are just $50 over melt. We also have 90% constitutional silver or junk silver at just $1.69 over spot per ounce. We also have the 1/10 ounce UK Gold Britannia coin at just $29.99 over melt. And finally, 1-ounce gold Canadian maples are just $59 over spot. Again, one of the lowest prices we've had on gold sovereign coins in years. To order our specials or any of the many other options we have available, call us at 1-888-81-LIBERTY. That's 1-888-815-4237. We're available after hours and on weekends, and we look forward to speaking with you.
Welcome back to Liberty and Finance. This is your host, Dunnigan Kaiser. We're glad to have a returning guest today. Phil Lowe is the founder of the Rumble channel, The Bitter Draught. He talks about economic principles in a way that hopefully everyone can understand, which is rather refreshing. We have him back on here for the third time. Phil, thanks for coming back on Liberty and Finance.
Thanks, Dunnigan. And yes, I got some feedback on our second episode. A lot of people were wondering who this guy was. Like, who is this guy? Coming on to talk about economics. And I am gearing my channel very much to people who are liberty-minded, but maybe haven't studied a lot of Austrian school academic processes. So I said I will gear my show towards introducing these concepts to them in 15-minute to 20-minute videos so that any Joe Sixpack can understand the Austrian school. And for those who don't know what the Austrian school is, it really is the philosophical underpinning of the Ron Paul movement. So if you like Ron Paul and you like what he has to say, he's a very, very smart guy, but he did not come up with all this stuff on his own. There is an entire economic school underneath it all that he is feeding from. And I happen to be trained in that school. And I can speak to, at a very introductory level, what you might want to know about the upcoming banking crisis and the dollar endgame and things that people are talking about. Now, if you've already read, Mises's theory of money and credit, and you have a picture of Murray Rothbard on your nightstand, I may be a little too basic for you, but like I said, if you just want to learn more and you're just new to this kind of thing, I think you should check out my channel.
Well, Phil, I like the idea of appealing to Joe Sixpack. I just wish I had one here, and it's a little early in the day though, so we'll have to schedule an evening interview for another time. We have a few questions for you. One of the provocative things that you've said is macroeconomics is junk science. That sounds pretty intriguing to people who haven't shelled out tens of thousands of dollars to a major university to get a macroeconomics degree. So why do you say that macroeconomics is junk science?
Sure. Now, I do want to differentiate between microeconomics, which has a sound logical underpinning, and macroeconomics, which really is junk science. And I say this with a bit of regret, as half of my degree is I am now calling junk science. But I have come to that conclusion at the ripe old age of 42. And let me explain why I think this is. And to do this, to get to the root of the matter, we have to understand what sound banking looks like on a gold standard. So if you have a gold standard where everyone's using gold as money, and you want to put your money in a bank, there are two services the bank offers you. A bank will offer you, the first service is just what's called a demand deposit. You go and you put your gold to the bank, and they give you bank credit in the form of either bank notes or bank credit, credited to your account, and you can come back at any time and get your gold out of the vault. When you do that, you have to pay for that service. There is no such thing. Nobody is going to pay you money to look at your gold in the vault for you. And they have to do round-the-clock security. They have to get the insurance. They have to get the big vault with the door that they open with much fanfare and close with much fanfare at the end of the day. So you have to pay for that. Now, many people, a lot of people don't like logging into the bank account. After, let's say you put $1,000 in and then 6 months later, there's $995 in. You say, where'd that $5 go? Well, it went to paying for the rest of the gold to sit there being secure. A lot of people don't like that. So the other service that banks on a gold standard offer is what's called a time deposit. And so you go to the bank and you say, I would like to earn some yields on my gold, and the bank will say, well, we know people who want to borrow your gold to use as money, and they have promised to pay us interest, and so we will give you a cut of that interest if you give us your gold for, let's say, a 6-month or a year period of time. The bank then goes and finds people who want to borrow your loaned gold, and if everything works right, they get interest. The borrower pays back interest to the bank, and the bank pays back interest to you, and everyone's happy and everything's going great. Unfortunately, human beings, being what they are, nobody's perfect, and sometimes the bank executives or the people in charge of the loans don't quite get it right. Either it's too high risk or not enough returns or whatever. And when it comes time to pay you back, they don't have the gold they said they were going to have. So an honest bank, the honest thing to do at that point is to sit you down and say, excuse me, Mrs. Murphy, we know we promised you 5% returns after a year of investment, but unfortunately the loans did not go exactly as planned, and so we are not able to return it. However, you did agree to assume risks. It says right here on the contract, you agreed to assume the risks of these loans not returning what we said they were going to return. So once again, we're sorry, but we've lost some of your money, or at least we've lost some of the interest that we promised to return to your money. Now, of course, that's the bell tolling of death. That's the sound of death to any bank executive to have to tell people that they've lost their money. So the bank executive is sitting there tossing and turning all night in bed. He says, I've lost poor Mrs. Murphy, old widow Murphy's, the money your husband entrusted to me before he died, and I've lost it, and I have to tell this poor lady that I've lost all her money. And so the bank executive says, you know what? There happens to be a lot of gold in the demand deposit section. So we have a lot of people that deposit the gold, and they're not all going to come back and try and demand that gold at one time. So I can just take a little bit out of the demand deposits, pay old Mrs. Murphy back, and then I'll make up that difference at some other point. I just need a stopgap emergency measure to take care of Mrs. Murphy here. When you've done that, you have guaranteed, 100% guaranteed, a bank run, because all gold when gold gets deposited into the banking system, it is always accounted for. So as soon as a nugget of gold enters the banking system, bank credit is generated for that nugget of gold. There is no loose gold floating around that can make up that missing money. And what you've done is you've created Schrodinger's dollar. So there was $1 that represented a nugget of gold, and now there's $2 that represents a certain quantity of gold. One has gone to Mrs. Murphy, and one is sitting there in the bank account, and you can, pull it out any day. Now, it might take a very long time. It might take 10, 20, 30, 40 years for this bank run to actually happen. But a bank run is absolutely guaranteed. At some point, somewhere, someone is going to come into a bank and try and get their money out. And when I say money, I mean gold. They're going to try and get their gold out, and the money will not be there. Now, it might not even be your bank. If you can get some other bank, banking is this maelstrom of activity. So if you can get some other bank to kind of take your bad debt, you can actually dodge that bullet yourself and have some other bank be the one that doesn't have the chairs when the music stops and everyone comes to get their, find a chair to sit in. And this was actually, this phenomena right here was happening a lot in the 1880s and 1890s, early 1900s. And I think, I'm not an expert in 19th century banking, but I think this was a product of the Civil War. I think during the Civil War, people were getting very loosey-goosey with the finances because they had a war to win. And after the war, it took 10, 20, 30, 40 years for the results of that to play out through the banking system. And in the 1880s, 1890s, and 1900s, there were these deflationary pulses and accompanying bank runs. So people were like, wait, there's way more notes. The entire system, people were realizing there are way more notes than there are actual nuggets of gold to satisfy these notes. And people kept running to their banks, and the banks would end up shutting down. So at the same time, all this is happening in the banking sector, there's this new intellectual movement coming to fruition, which is called the progressive movement. And and I'm painting with a very broad brush here, but what the progressive movement's fundamental principles was nature is messy, nature is sloppy, and nature is suboptimal. And they applied this to many different things. They applied it to the eugenics program's great, a great example. Eugenics program is not great. It's a great example. They would say, look, if we just let people breed, like look at the mongrels that are produced, right? So we should control who is breeding, and then we can make the most perfect specimens of humankind. All right. And they would apply that same logic to the banking system. They said, look, we're letting these bank managers try and figure out what the correct interest rate should be on these loans. And they keep messing up, and the people keep having bank run. The people keep trying to withdraw their money. We keep having these deflationary pulses. What we need to do is create a central bank. So we're going to get the smartest people in the world. We're going to send them to Harvard, Yale, Princeton. We're going to teach them all the principles of economics, and then we're going to get these people and we're going to put them in a room, and they're going to come up with the best interest rates. So we don't need to worry about these like podunk, bank managers in Topeka, Kansas, misallocating the resources, because we're going to have the smartest people do it. And of course, the result of that was they made a whole hash out of everything. They ruined it, and the result was 1929, because they produced way, way, way more banknotes than ever existed before. And eventually all the banks got called in at the exact same time, and you had the crash of 1929. Now, at that time, the correct response was to say, geez, the smartest people in the room didn't actually come up with the correct solution. We should go back to decentralized banking, admit our mistake, and pretend this never happened. But what did the progressives do? They said, you know what? We had two problems here. This is where 1929 happened. We had two problems. We did not have enough information, because even though we're the smartest people in the room, if we don't have the right information, we're not going to get the right interest rates, and we don't have enough power. We made the mistake of having all the gold decentralized, and that way people ran and got their gold because they didn't like we created these pristine Federal Reserve notes, but people didn't trust them. So they went and got their gold, and that caused the crash. So what we need to do, we need to take all the gold and lock it into Fort Knox and not let anyone ever take it. And then there won't be any more bank runs, because if you run to the bank and say, I want my money, they can hand you Federal Reserve notes, and we can print as many Federal Reserve notes as needed to stop the bank panic, right? But the gold itself will be safe and away from these mongrel, peasant, unwashed masses' hands, locked at Fort Knox, and our system will be pure. And as far as information goes, there's this guy, John Maynard Keynes, and he is writing these brilliant books about how we can use the power of our brains to come up with the best system for running the entire economy nationwide. And this is where we've ended up in the modern system today. So let's talk about some of the concepts that everyone is using now that I think are complete junk science. So first concept we're going to talk about is GDP. GDP is gross domestic product. It's on the news all the time. The economists always come out and trumpet it. GDP rose by X amount. And therefore, it is a sign that it's clearly a sign that we are doing a great job at the Federal Reserve, right? So if you know what the GDP is, it's just a measurement of transactions, and it's not a measurement of any of the usefulness of anything being produced at all. So if more washing machines are produced this year than last year, and more Boeing 747s are produced more this year than last year, and more shoes or whatever, they declare it a success. And there is, if you zoom out to the far away, you can say that there is a correlation between things being produced and human flourishing, human happiness. Now, some people might say, no, Phil, you're wrong. There's this village in Italy where they live in the 1700s, and they all live to 130 years old, and they eat the grain. They farm with their hands themselves, and they only use the manure from their own animals. Okay, that's fine. But granted these some exceptions where some people might say these people are living more fulfilling lives. Most people tend to want to have more stuff to make their life more convenient, up to a point. So you can say something like the washing machine makes life more convenient for most people. Most people don't like washing their clothes by hand. They want to put it in the washing machine and come back an hour later and get the clean clothes. That doesn't mean that we can just stack up all the washing machines on a ledger and say, okay, that means we have X amount of human flourishing because we have X number of washing machines. Because then the economists get these crazy ideas. They start thinking, you know what? If more washing machines means more human flourishing, then we should subsidize washing machines because then we'll get more human flourishing. Or we should punish people who don't have washing machines because those people are decreasing human flourishing. So we should make them buy washing machines to increase human flourishing. Or even better, we, the government, should buy washing machines and just put them in a field, right? It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter if people are actually using it. As long as we have that X number of washing machines were purchased, it doesn't matter if we just put them in a field, right? Human flourishing, according to GDP, has gone up. And that's actually a true statement. If the government bought 1 million washing machines and put them in a field, GDP will have gone up by 1 million washing machines or 1,000, whatever number I just said. So the measurement of human flourishing, what they're trying to do is actually measure human happiness and say they're doing a good job. Now, nominal GDP, which is just all it does is measure the number of things that have been, the final products and services that have been bought. That will go up with inflation. Take a sip here. If I have a car this year and it's $20,000, and next year inflation is skyrocketing and that exact same car is $25,000, right? When the car is bought the second year, that is recorded as $25,000 of car, not $20,000 of car. So even though it's the exact same car, GDP records it as an increase in human flourishing because the car has become more expensive. Now, what you're going to say, or what a standard economist, not you necessarily, but what a standard economist is going to say is, well, Phil, nobody uses nominal GDP. We use real GDP. And the way we use real GDP is we account for inflation. So let's talk about inflation, Dunnigan. So there are two definitions of inflation. My definition of inflation is as follows. If I write a check for money I do not have, so I write you a check, and it turns out I don't have the money underlying that check, that's called fraud. If any individual does that, that's called fraud, and they go to jail for it. When a bank does that, and every bank does, when you go to get a bank loan, they credit your account with money they do not have, and they're just assets and liabilities on a balance sheet, right? That's called fractional reserve banking, and it's perfectly legal. So the bank is allowed to do, it's legalized fraud. Now, when a central bank does this, when a central bank prints Federal Reserve notes, like our central bank does, prints Federal Reserve notes and sends them out, and they're unbacked by anything except the, purchasing power and, good faith for all debts, public and private, then that is called inflation in my book. Part of inflation, inflation has several very, very negative consequences. One of those consequences is what we colloquially call inflation, which is a generalized rise of the price of goods and services economy-wide. Right? So if I print up, if I'm the Federal Reserve and I print up $1 million and I hand it to you, Dunnigan, and you go and you buy $1 million worth of Bitcoin, that would not translate to CPI because that's not a consumer good. You invested that money. Now, you're investing in nonsense. You're investing in absolutely nothing, and you're going to pay for that later. But that will not show up in what is measured as inflation, which is the CPI, right? The CPI is it doesn't even do that. I'm going to get to that in a second. But it's only supposed to be measuring consumer goods. So if the price of eggs and the price of phones and the price of shoes goes up, CPI will measure that. However, CPI completely ignores the other aspects of inflation, which is what's called the illusion of prosperity. It's when you get fake money and you go invest it in the stock market, or you buy bonds, or you buy cryptocurrency, and you feel like you are wealthier until the crash happens, and then it is revealed you are not wealthier at all. In fact, you've been wasting your purchasing power on nonsense this entire time. So the way even with that, the way CPI is calculated is complete nonsense. So the way they calculate it is they literally just they do a random sampling of goods and services across the nation, and they just write things. Oh, eggs here in New Hampshire are $2.50 a dozen, and eggs down here in Alabama are $1.75 a dozen. I mean, I wish, but they just kind of average it out, and they come up with this very complicated formula, and they say, okay, well, this is what inflation is for this period of time. Now, many people have realized that they've changed the definition of inflation over the years. So in the 70s, there was an entirely different structure of inflation as opposed to now. And the reason they changed it is because the numbers, even as they measure them, were much higher using the original definition of inflation than what they are now. And if you want just one example of how flawed CPI is, the current definition of CPI, the current measurement of CPI, by far the number one tool is what's called owner's equivalent rent. So they call up a homeowner and they say, "Dear sir, if you were to rent out your house, how much would you charge in rent for that?" And the person, I don't know, $5,000 a month or whatever they do. They come out with a number in their head. That was not even a market transaction. No money changed hands, right? They just asked a theoretical of a homeowner who's not renting, how much would you charge if you were to rent? And I'm guessing for whatever reason that number tends to come in low because the Federal Reserve seems to really like that number, because that made up opinion of what a market transaction might be is the number one factor that feeds into inflation. So if the CPI is this nonsense concoction of nothing, and then it feeds into GDP to get real GDP, which is itself a nonsense concoction of nothing, this is pseudoscience feeding into pseudoscience, and the output is complete garbage. So why are they doing this, right? The academic understanding of this, it really comes back to what is an understanding of what value is. And there's these fundamental differences between the different schools of economics on what exactly is value, right? And the original economists, Adam Smith and the immediate successors to him, thought that, for example, when you go to buy an apple, and you hold up the apple, there's an appleness that has an intrinsic value to it. It's called the objective theory of value. Mm-hmm. So every good and service out has its own value. But this is easily just proved because you may love apples and I may hate apples. So if I hate apples and you love apples, how can we both have these diametrically opposed opinions of an apple if the apple has this intrinsic appleness that gives it value? So, and the early economists tried to measure this, and they gave up because there's no way to attach a unit of value other than price to an object. Then, a little bit later, came some economists who thought, well, maybe the work you put in, and this is a very common misconception of how value is determined, the work you put into an apple, so raising the apple, planting the tree, fertilizing it, watering it, tending it, and then harvesting the apple, and then shipping the apple, all this labor that you applied to the apple is what is giving it its value. And that's called the labor theory of value. And that's actually underlying Marxism. Marxism is all about the labor theory of value. And the problem with the labor theory of value is that it assumes that all work is productive. However, if Stalin says, okay, all of you peasants over there, I want you to dig a big hole and then fill it back in again. Work has been performed. A lot of work has been performed, but nothing productive was accomplished. You just dug a hole and then filled it back in. So labor theory of value also fundamentally does not work. The Austrian school has what's called the subjective theory of value. And the subjective theory of value is that each one of us has this infinite matrix of values that we have in our heads. So you may love apples to the point of indecency. So every time you go to the store, you just passionate love for apples, and you can't get enough of them. You can't even explain to me. I mean, you could say I really, really, really like apples, Phil, but you cannot explain to me in any quantitative sense how much you like the apples, right? So if the apples are 60 cents and you buy an apple, we can measure that. We can say, okay, Dunnigan bought an apple, but we don't know how passionately, we cannot identify that your passionate love for the apple. We just know that you bought it. That one point, that one data point is all we have to go on. And the problem is the macroeconomists are trying to make something of that. They're trying to say there's something here that we can put together based on that one single data point of you purchasing the apple. And so therefore, and more than just measuring it, they're trying to control it. They're trying to say, gee, if we can just get Dunnigan to buy a few more apples, like we just need to do something, because we know he'll buy more. We think he'll buy more if we get a cattle prod and poke him a little bit. We think we'll get him to buy more apples. So they're constantly trying to the academic side, the banking side is just trying to rip you off. The academic side of macroeconomics is trying to manipulate human behavior and play God. But because once you understand the subjective theory of value and the Austrian School of Economics, you come to the inevitable conclusion that you cannot measure this, you cannot manipulate it, and if you try to manipulate it, you will come up with suboptimal solutions. You will drive people away from their natural human flourishing and into unproductive directions. So my conclusion, to wrap this all up, I think I would advise that anyone who's liberty-minded, anyone listening to me now, we should reject macroeconomic concepts like GDP and CPI. And we should not use them. And this applies to a lot of people on our side. When you go and you tut and you say, oh, inflation's higher than it used to be, and you're pointing to the CPI, what you are doing is giving credence to macroeconomists, because what you are saying is, even though they might be using the wrong measurement of CPI, you are conceding the point that there is, in fact, a correct measurement of CPI. And if they just get enough information, if they get more information and more power, that they can somehow find that correct CPI. And the truth is, you cannot. Right? There is no such thing as a CPI. Inflation is printing money. Inflation is printing notes for money that you don't have. How you measure that fraud really doesn't matter. If you're printing notes for money you don't have, the measurement doesn't really matter, right? So you should not concede. I don't concede any of these points. I reject the concept of GDP. I reject because it's a fake measurement of human flourishing, and I reject the concept of CPI as a measurement of inflation. And they serve no purpose to our ends. So if you remember the movie The Matrix, Dunnigan, Neo, the little kid tells Neo, the real trick is understanding that there is no spoon, right? And when Neo realizes that, suddenly he sees all the ones and zeros, coming down, and he's able to win, right? If you try and use the tools of GDP and CPI and all these other, macroeconomic tools against a Keynesian economist in a debate or, just anything, you are just giving in to Agent Smith. You're stuck in the matrix. You'll never get out of it, because they'll say, we just haven't, you may be right that, we are measuring inflation too high, but that's just because we don't have enough information to power yet. So what I say to people is just reject all of this and go back to focusing on yourself and maximizing your own human flourishing. And if we all do that, we will maximize human flourishing.
Well, it resonates well with me and with our audience, because since 2013, when we founded our channel as Reluctant Preppers, the whole idea was paying attention to your own self and your own household and your own family and your own community, and making reasonable and prudent preparations to take care of yourself and the next generation of your family, no matter what may come our way, within reason. And a lot of that has to do with freedom, human freedom. That old song, people just want to be free, and that flies in the face of all the centralized control that you just listed the pitfalls of. One of the things that you also have written about and talked about is human capital, how people need to invest in themselves prior to kind of this end game scenario or crash that Rafi talks about quite often. Do you want to elaborate on that?
Yes, absolutely. So one of the things, I don't have enough time to elaborate why the system is doing this to us. I have done it on my own channel, and maybe we can discuss it on a future episode. But the current system, the way the fraudulent system is set up, is that debt in America, debt must increase at an exponential rate. And so the system wants you and your family and everyone you know and everyone you love, they want you sitting on a lazy boy, eating garbage, drinking garbage, not doing any productive work at all, and just getting obese and diabetic and into debt. The important thing is you get into debt. All those other things are just supplements to getting you into debt, right? And on the outside world, everyone who's not an American, the system demands that they slave away for notes that are going to be revealed to be worthless. So they slave away for nothing to give us stuff that we are, wallowing, unable to move from obesity in getting, because we're not doing productive work, right? So because the system demands us to get into debt, we've sort of turned into the people, like if you've seen the movie WALL-E, right?
That's exactly the picture you were painting. Yes, with your words.
The people that they can barely move, they have no skills, and when this system it blows up, and it's going to blow up, and I think quite soon. It's kind of like when the ship lands and the robots don't work anymore in the movie, and the people just kind of like waddle out into the sunlight, and none of them know how to do anything, and they're going to have to start over from scratch. And we are sort of in that situation done again, I'm sorry to say. So what happens is when the monetary system implodes, people in Bangladesh are going to say, why are we making socks for these people? They're giving us worthless notes. We're not going to make more socks for them. And nobody in America has made a sock in 50 years. So until the sock manufacturing gets up and running, and maybe you want to be a part of that, or you, the audience member, maybe want a part of starting up a textile manufacturing. While that gets up and running, people are going to need to fix their socks, because socks are going to become very, very, very expensive. Socks, underwear, clothes, all this kind of stuff. So my recommendation to people is, if you have a hobby that you enjoy doing that you think might be productive in the in-game, like sewing, that you upgrade things a little bit. So if you have a little personal sewing machine, and maybe you putter around a little bit with the sewing machine, I would seriously consider getting a small industrial sewing machine. Just not a huge upgrade, just a small one, so that you can do this kind of stuff faster. Even if you don't need, you're right now you're thinking, oh, my personal one's fine. It's just me here. If you get the industrial ones, let's say, so you can maybe triple your production or quadruple your production, even if you don't need it right now, when the end game hits, your neighbors are going to need to have their socks or their shirts mended, and you will have not only the skills to do it, but you'll have a small industrial scale machine capable of handling that kind of thing. Same thing if you like brewing. I would consider, let's say, instead of brewing, maybe you brew a little home thing of 10 gallons a month or something. Maybe upgrade to a small industrial one where you're brewing maybe 100 gallons or a couple hundred gallons a month, right? Once again, you can apply this to just about anywhere. What I would advise against is saying, oh, I think the end game is going to happen tomorrow, so I'm going to buy 6 sewing machines. I'm going to rent a factory over there, a warehouse over there. I'm going to buy 6 industrial sewing machines, and I'm going to hire 6 workers to work for me right now. Because the problem is the end game hasn't happened yet. So a Bangladeshi will always outcompete you on price in this system. The way the system is set up, they are working for absolute pennies on the dollar, and there's nothing you can do to fight against that. But once that goes away, you are the only game in town. So don't put yourself in a situation where you need the end game to happen, because no one really, it's going to happen when it happens. But if you can upgrade a little bit and sustain that upgrade, you can maximize your ability to really hit the end game running, as far as, a personal skill, or, getting ready to to strike while the iron's hot, because I promise you, whatever these kind of skills are, you're going to be the only game in town, and you're going to be able to charge, quite a profit until the economy gets, up and running again, and we get back to where we were.
I wanted to put 3 underscores below that from different guests that we've had. Bill Holter talks about, in addition to just getting some essential equipment that you may need, is to get spare parts, the essential spare parts for the ones that you already have or the ones that you're going to have, because it may be difficult or impossible to get spare parts in the future. We've certainly had a taste of that during the global supply chain collapse of the COVID crash. Second one is from Joel Salatin, teaching farmer from Polyface Farms, saying, you better get your food security figured out. So it may mean stocking up on some non-perishables. That's great. But if you also have the ability to raise some fresh things for your family, or get connected and build relationships with people in your local community who do know how to grow fresh things, that's even better. And then the third is your own personal health. And that certainly struck close to home in our family, our household, is to try to, if you've got, doesn't matter how much stuff you got stocked up, if you don't have your health, what good does it do for you? So work on making sure that you have the strength and the fitness and the just the basic robustness of good health to carry through difficult times. Those are 3 really good ways to start today in small ways, and build on that. Any comments on that before we move on?
No, that's absolutely true. In fact, staying healthy and staying out of debt actually attacks the system itself, because like I said, the system requires debt. So if you don't have medical debt, you don't have debt. So the healthier you are, the less debt you're in, the more you're engaged in interacting, like the more you are physically attacking this inflationary system. And each one of us is not going to topple the system over, but at some point, when the debt cannot go up anymore, that's, the fact that you did not contribute to that debt means it happened all the sooner.
Our guests, our audience has heard me say this before, but it bears saying again here. My wife and I used to live in Northwest Ohio, and we would, for getaway weekends, etc., we would frequently visit Central Ohio, where there's flourishing Amish and Mennonite communities, very agrarian-based, close to the land. They know how to fix things on their own. They know how to help each other in community. They raise barns together. They do woodworking expert, and they do, blanket making and all kinds of cool stuff. And every year we went out there, I'd say to her as we drove back home, the Amish are looking less and less crazy every year that we go out and visit them. So now you've also talked about those who make financial preparations by owning real things such as physical precious metals, etc., are setting themselves up for an almost undescribable benefit or advantage in a Endgame scenario. Can you elaborate on that so people can understand why that's so important to have real financial assets in your part of your planning and preparation?
Absolutely. So when this blows, and this is actually my most recent video, when this does blow, the purchasing power, all the money, all the credit, all the purchasing power of credit gets slammed into the purchasing power of money itself, which is gold, silver, and copper. And the holders of gold, silver, and copper, we know this from history. This has happened several times in history. It happened in revolutionary France. It happened in Weimar. It happened in the fall of the USSR. The holders of actual money at that time are able to acquire vast assets. It's a very brief spike, because what happens is only a few people, only the few crazy stackers like us have anything. Everyone else thought we were crazy, and then it suddenly reveals that, we weren't crazy at all. And so the people that were living that Bitcoin bro lifestyle suddenly have to liquidate everything in order to get money to buy food to survive. And so in just using history as a guide, in my most recent video, I gave some rough estimations of what people can expect. And so the toys, right? The Lamborghinis, the personal aircraft, the RVs, you can in gold and silver terms, you can expect to buy them to maybe 1%, maybe as high as 3 or 5% of their original purchase price in dollar terms. So you're talking about getting a Lamborghini for the equivalent of something like $5,000 in today's money. So just be, a few ounces of gold, maybe an ounce of gold, or maybe a few ounces of silver to pick up a Lamborghini. Now, I don't recommend driving a Lamborghini around town during a situation like this, but you can purchase one and put it away somewhere if you got space for it, and that's what you've always wanted in your life. I would say absolutely go for it. In addition to the toys, now the toys are going to go first, and I advise people because whenever there's a panic, the first thing people sell are their toys. I would advise people don't go overboard on the toys because it's going to be very exciting. You're like, oh, I can have the beachfront property I've always wanted. I can have the boat. I can have all these things that I've always wanted. If you go overboard on the toys, you're going to miss out on the investment opportunities that are going to come almost immediately after. And that is, and unfortunately, this is the scary part. The way Walmart and Target and Home Depot, the way this business model works is exactly like I said before with the debt, right? They get cheap junk from China and bring it over, and then we send them debt notes. When the debt collapses, when no more debt can be accrued, these stores are going to be gone in probably a couple weeks after the debt bomb blows. And that's really, I don't have no love for Walmart. However, a lot of people are now quite dependent on Walmart, and it's going to be ripped out from under them in a couple of weeks. However, the structure will still be there unless it is physically burned down, and I don't think they're all going to get burned down. I mean, I hope we don't get into a situation where physical structures are being torn down at scale. Assuming the building is still there, whoever owns that property is going to say, "Oh my, it's the apocalypse, and I didn't invest properly, and I need money to get some food, so I'm going to sell this Walmart for absolutely whatever I can get for it." And based upon my research in the book When Money Dies, it's back there. I'd get it another time, but When Money Dies, I think you can expect to purchase an entire Walmart for maybe 200 to 500 ounces of silver, right? Or and divide that by about 15 to get the gold ratio, right? Same thing with, a Home Depot or anything like that. Now, as far as residential stuff, if Weimar Berlin is an example, you will be able to get a penthouse apartment in Manhattan with a view of Central Park for about 100 ounces of silver, maybe even less. It's going to be a very brief period. This period's not going to last long because people are going to snap this up. But if you move quickly and wherever you are, you can get this kind of thing. And Lynette Zhang, who I think is correct on this, has said her famous quote is 25 ounces of gold will buy you a city block, including all the buildings. That is true. I do want to add the caveat, those buildings might be on fire when that happens, but they absolutely will be on sale. And what's important is, I know a lot of your guests are probably drooling at these, the concepts because they've been stacking their whole lives and they can't wait to jump in on this. And you absolutely should. The faster our stacks get out, the less this is going to suck. So because the money will start flowing again, people will be able to get the food they need to survive, and the division of labor will reestablish itself. So we're all going to figure out what we should be doing. Were we not in clown world? The faster this gets out, absolutely the better. So I advise people you should absolutely buy what you can. Don't end up where you're in your situation where you're in yourself have no silver, but buy what you can with your excess silver to get the flow of capital going again. And I also talk about, in my video, I talked about saving your neighbors as well. If you're, if there's people you care about and you like them and you want to, try and help them out, you should absolutely consider buying their houses. I actually don't. My original thought was that we should be extra generous to everybody, but I changed my mind on that, and here is why. If you have 200 ounces of silver to buy a house, to buy housing, you've allocated this, I want to buy land and I have 200 ounces of silver. And one of your neighbors comes to you and says, I want to sell you my house. And you say, okay, well, times are hard and I'm feeling very generous, so here's 200 ounces of silver your house to make the transaction. You might have another neighbor who wanted to sell his house too, but now you have no more silver to buy his house, and you could have bought them both for 100 ounces of silver, right? So this neighbor is now going to have a very hard time if maybe you're the only guy in town who had any silver, right? So the being generous to person A did not help person B. It would be better if you helped both A and B, even if you're helping person A a little bit less. So I would say feel free to negotiate hard, and always remember any agreed upon transaction is mutually beneficial to both sides. So always be honest. Everyone should always be honest. But if both sides can always come to an agreement, then definitionally both sides are better off for doing so.
The other thing that tempers my enthusiasm to not get giddy about this kind of scenario is that in times like these, it can be extremely hard times. We're talking about immense human suffering, many doing without, who didn't have preparedness, and people have lived this long by being very adaptable, and sometimes that means taking what others have, and so there's a lot of concern to be had about security, about making hard decisions, as you mentioned, about who you can help and who it might be a threat to you. So it's a very sobering time to think seriously through these things ahead of time, so that and one of the things that is often humbling to know about the unknown is that you really can't anticipate all of the possible situations that you might face. All you can do is try to be emotionally and mentally and physically and financially and psychologically prepared for adaptability. And a firm foundation of faith often underpins a lot of our viewers and clients who have talked to me, that sort of thing. Their preparedness, big picture, is just saying, there's going to be bigger forces at work than I, and I'm ready for. I try to make myself ready for playing a role in that. So it's very thought-provoking. Phil, if people want to dig into the details, you've alluded several times to having made a recent video on this. Where should they go?
Sure. So I would just add on top of that real quick. If you find yourself thinking about the end game is fine. If you find yourself getting panicky about it, you're probably not doing anything productive. And I went through this myself. I mean, no one can look at the end game and go and not have a panic attack at some point during that. But if you're thinking rationally and you're not overthinking it, so you have some security preparations in place, but you don't have, a landmines in front of your front door, then I think you are, doing okay. You're going to be okay. And I ran into a neighbor who I've seen him before. I never spoke to him. And I went up and I for whatever reason, I wanted to introduce myself to him finally after seeing him on the street a million times. So I walked up and I said, "Hey, my name's Phil." And he said, "Oh yeah, I know." And I said, "You know?" He said, "Yeah, I watch your show." So it just goes to show you don't know who else is prepping and who isn't. So you will, you'll find out who the preppers are when the time comes. And I don't think we are as alone as we think we are, as it sometimes may feel.
Well, I certainly hope not, because that's one of my gravest concerns all these years has been the number of people, the vast majority I'm concerned, may be woefully unprepared for things that may be coming, anywhere from natural disasters to these man-made financial collapses that are eventually look inevitable and perhaps imminent. So remind us how people can find you.
Yes. So you can find me on Rumble at The Bitter Draught, and you can also email me at thebitterdraught@gmail.com, and you can find me on X at The Bitter Draught, and that is the old spelling, DRAUGHT.
Well, Phil Lowe, thank you for joining us again here on Liberty and Finance. And folks, if you don't want to miss a single episode with Phil or any of our other guests, including Rafi Farber, our mutual good friend, make sure that you're on our free mailing list by going to libertyandfinance.com. That's our website, libertyandfinance.com. Put in your email address, click submit, make sure you confirm on the confirming email, and you're in. You get one email in your inbox per day. We don't share your email with anyone, and you won't miss a single episode with any of our guests, including Phil and Rafi, and any of our weekly specials, and you'll be plugged in. Phil, thanks for joining us again here on Liberty and Finance.
My pleasure.
This is Kaiser Johnson with Liberty and Finance, and these are the Miles Franklin weekly specials for January 27th through February 3rd, 2025, while supplies last. This week, backdated 1-ounce silver Austrian Philharmonics are just $2.85 over spot, one of the lowest prices we've had on a sovereign coin in years. Next, AU pre-1933 $20 gold St. Gaudens coins are just $50 over melt. We also have 90% constitutional silver or junk silver at just $1.69 over spot per ounce. We also have the 1/10 ounce UK Gold Britannia coin at just $29.99 over melt. And finally, 1-ounce gold Canadian maples are just $59 over spot. Again, one of the lowest prices we've had on gold sovereign coins in years. To order our specials or any of the many other options we have available, call us at 1-888-81-LIBERTY. That's 1-888-815-4237. We're available after hours and on weekends, and we look forward to speaking with you.